Good afternoon. I just want to acknowledge before we get started that in many ways this is a year in which we're dealing with uncertainty that we haven't had in a number of years. The relationship in terms of how the regional churches interact with each other and how the regional church funds the national church and vice versa is changing. And until we've gone through a year under a changed system, we don't know 100% exactly what's going to happen. And so, as we always are, we're relying on God to provide and on the faithful volunteers and people who are doing this work to be able to help us sort all of these things out. But it does add to the financial uncertainty that many congregations are facing as they try to balance their own budgets. The most notable change that I want to make sure I draw people's attention to is that the funding from MCEC that is forwarded to MC Canada is no longer on a percentage of church giving covenant basis. So in the past, if MCEC received less revenue from churches and less contributions from churches during a year, then we passed on less money to MC Canada proportionately. In the budget that you'll be looking at this year, the number that is set for MC Canada operating support is fixed and does not change regardless of what happens to MCEC revenue from individual giving and from church giving. In a related change, any amounts that are given to the MCEC office that come from individuals or congregations that are designated to a specific witness worker or program will be received and receipted at MCEC and then passed on to MC Canada dollar for dollar over and above the fixed operating contribution. So I want to make sure that's clear. If an individual or a church sends us a check for $100 to support a specific witness project, we will receive and receipt that payment and then turn around and write a check to MC Canada for $100 for that witness project. It goes straight through onto Winnipeg. When comparing last year's MC Canada contribution then of $736,560 to this year's fixed operating contribution, I need to note that the 2017-18 contribution included congregational contributions to witness. So if you're trying to compare it and you're looking at it and seeing that it's $630 this year and it was $736 last year, we need to also add in the $82,000 of witness money that's being forwarded. And as well, we are now paying some costs to employ Norm Dick as someone to engage witness in the MCEC region that was previously a responsibility that was only borne by MC Canada. And so there's some added expense in our costs of doing ministry that were previously part of the national structure. I've tried to take all of these variables into consideration as we built our budget, but to still build the budget using the same philosophy and approach as we had the last few years, which isn't to start with what we think we're going to get and figure out how to spend it, but it's to start by asking the ministry leaders within MCEC, what is God calling you to do, and how can we help? So you will note that there's some terminology and presentation changes on this spending plan compared to the actual results from last year, and I'll be highlighting those as I go through the summary page on page 44 of your discernment documents. In terms of revenue, we've renamed the revenue classifications a little more clearly, and I want to note that the increase in projected individual and estate donations, which were previously named as above budget donations, is due to a new structure where all as undesignated individual donor dollars are encouraged to be sent to MCEC. So whereas individual donors in the past might send a check to MCEC and a check to MC Canada, we're now encouraging all individual donors to send all of their national or regional church support as individuals to the MCEC office, because the funds that we receive from that are part of what helps fund our commitment to MC Canada and the new structure. Church giving is budgeted to drop slightly from last year based on the giving plan commitments we have received from congregations, and also based on removing the relational witness givings as a separate pass-through line item. But regardless of those small changes, total external revenue in the spending plan is projected to be $2,171,120, and I can report for the first quarter of this new year, which covers February 1st to April 30th, we seem to be on track compared to the spending plan that we have set in terms of the generosity of individual and church givers. In terms of our partner ministries, we're pleased to be able to commit again to supporting Mennonite World Conference, our schools, and our camps at the same level as the previous fiscal year. The new financial statement presentation attempts to make clear the change with funding MC Canada, which is now shown, as you can see in your discernment documents and on the screen, as two separate line items. There's an undesignated operating commitment of $630,000, and based on what we've seen from church giving to Witness in the past, we anticipate another $82,000 on top of that will pass to MC Canada to support specific Witness projects. I want to point out again that $630,000 operating contribution will be sent to MC Canada in 12 equal monthly installments, regardless of what is happening with revenue at the MCEC level. An additional contribution that passes through dollar for dollar any relational Witness contributions we receive at the MCEC office from individuals or churches is again budgeted for separately. And we're also able to continue to contribute to the Canadian Mennonite Every Home Plan. And so the total partner ministry gifts that we anticipate for this coming year is $1,146,393, which is approximately 53% of our external operating revenue. In terms of operations, this leaves a little over $1 million of net operating revenue to fund the operations of MCEC. And this new spending plan is largely in line with the previous year actual, with some allowances for inflation. A couple exceptions I would just want to point out. Now that Anabaptist Learning Workshop is up and running at full level, there are dollars that have been added to the Leadership Council budget this year as a contribution from MCEC operations to help fund the ongoing activity of Anabaptist Learning Workshop. In the previous year, there was a surplus of funds that had been sent from MCEC, and so we did not make those contributions in the previous fiscal year, but in this year, we will be making those full contributions to ALW. The Mission Council budget, which includes a revenue draw of just under $180,000 from our mission donations and bequest restricted fund, has increased largely due to the addition of new staff to share in the fostering of Witness relationships between MCEC churches and individuals and MC Canada's active Witness projects. And there's also an increase to the congregational resourcing budget to reflect a further investment in relearning community. We have a third cohort of MCEC congregations that are journeying through relearning community right now, with hopes of a fourth cohort to start in the fall, and possibly even a cohort in Saskatchewan sometime later this year or next year. And so we've added some funds in order to help support that ongoing initiative and activity. And there's also some money allocated to Informed Conversations, which is an initiative you'll be hearing more about this afternoon, as well as some additional staffing for a full year with our 3 new regional ministry associates. So our total ministry expenses within MCEC then are just over $1,230,000, which leaves us with a net operating deficit of just over $200,000. As I stated last night, based on the balance in our Faithful Steward Reserve Fund as of January 31st, 2018, by policy, MCEC may draw up to $207,217 from this fund in order to offset the operating deficit. We recognize that this level of deficit and draw from reserves is not sustainable. However, this is a year of transition, and there's a lot of excitement about all of the things that we've been hearing about on this stage last night and today. And so we really felt that this wasn't the year to cut that number back as we try to walk forward and as we try to have God unveil his plan for how he wants MCEC to use the gifts that we are stewarding. So our financial position will be monitored on an ongoing basis, and this policy will be revisited next year when there is a year of history under the new system that we can look back on to help inform our future. So again, we thank all of our congregations and individuals who support the ministry of MCEC financially and with time. And we just pray that God will continue to reveal his plan to us as we walk forward.
Thank you, Sean. We will adopt the spending plan later on this afternoon, but we do want to take a few minutes, 4 or 5 minutes or so, to take any questions from the floor about what you've just heard Sean present. So if you have questions, make your way to the microphone, state your name and your congregation, again, for the benefit of those taking minutes.
Jonathan Sealing, Vineland United Mennonite Church. I'm here with 2 others, and there are a few others standing up who met as the youth leaders during lunch. We met to kind of share notes on how things are going and see what common concerns we might have. And many of us are encouraged by some of the things we heard this morning. And many of us are deeply concerned about the budget and its lack of attention to direct congregational youth ministry in the form of a congregational minister, like a youth minister, as we had for many years in the past. So we aren't trying to hijack the meeting and present a motion that would need to be debated and throw this year's budget into a tailspin. We are jointly standing, though, saying that we are sharing many struggles, many challenges that need to be concerned for the whole conference, for the whole church. And a lack of finances for a youth minister position like this, that can't be the excuse anymore, given what's happening really across the board in all our congregations with dwindling youth and many challenges that we share. There are many more things to add to this. I made a similar comment last year, and I don't want to hijack the mic or the time. But we would request that going forward, MCEC, despite our deficit this year and all the other concerns and the good things going on, to reconsider its suspension of a youth conference minister position and to reprioritize that in this year going forward. Anything to add?
I'd just like to add as well that we're not talking about a position just to provide programming, but also to provide some leadership around strategic thinking around how at a congregational level we can be effective in engaging youth. So we're not talking about just a position to plan events, but we're talking about a position to engage congregations and youth leaders on the ground with how we can learn to think differently about engaging our youth.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, Dave's got a few comments.
I appreciate you raising the concern. Faith formation for our youth is obviously something that the church needs to make a priority and do well. We have not had a full-time youth minister role since 2005, so about 13 years, and that was a philosophical decision. But times change, and maybe it's time to have that conversation again. It's not like we don't put dollars into youth faith formation. If you look at our budget, we do have those programming areas for Yella is leaving within the week, the young adult Israel-Palestine trip. We have the junior youth retreats, etc. We also, if you notice in the budget, we have $300,000 of spending for our camps and schools. So we invest heavily in youth faith formation. The question I hear, though, is, yeah, a lot of that is through other partners. What about the congregational piece? So I think that's an important philosophical discussion piece that needs to be engaged. We had, as one step in that direction, designated a portion of Liz Weber's time to do some of that leadership, and Liz started that, and I think that's where this conversation is coming from. Unfortunately, Liz made a decision to change employment in January, so my apologies, that conversation did get somewhat dropped and hijacked, so I'm sorry for that. But I think this is exciting. I like the energy, I like the concern. I think we need to have a good strategic conversation in the coming year and ask, is that the way to go? What are the options? Let's explore something. So thank you so much, and let's give it some good thought and exploration.
Other questions?
Right here.
Oh, sorry. Yep.
Diane Lichty, Tavistock Mennonite Church. And I don't normally speak at these things, but when I heard that group speak, I went to my notes that I wrote earlier today. When I heard, what kind of church are we if they're all like you? And I do have gray. And Marilyn Rudy Froze saying the calls to stay connected. And my congregation saying to me, we need to look after our youth. We need to look after our youth. So I'm passing that on to you. And I am agreeing with what you just heard from some people that met at noon, that you need to think about a dedicated position for children and youth and young adults, and not at the level you're giving, and not expecting your partners to do it all. I think your churches are calling you to do that too.
Thank you.
I'd like to say a thank you for including the financial pages in the discernment book for the early perusal. It made it so much easier for me, and I'm sure a lot of other people, to look them over and not feel so lost when topics are discussed. I'd also, while I'm up here, I'd also like to thank the music group for their leadership in leading us with all the music that they have today.
Thank you. Noted. Other questions? Okay. Thank you for the comments, and they will be noted and they will be acted on. So it's a lot easier for me to say that because I'm no longer an executive, so I can say, I can make promises for them, all kinds of promises. So, we will definitely commit to drawing up a plan based on what we've heard here. So there clearly is an appetite for that at the congregational level as well for that piece. So thank you.
I would like to make a few comments on the spending plan. I know Sean had presented it as we were finishing lunch, and you may not have all been here. So I guess my first comment is, if you have any questions, please ask Sean. I don't really mean that, obviously. But if you have questions about anything after today's meeting, those of us are available from the AFSC or the executive, or obviously our finance people, to answer them. I would like to, just formally thank Brent and Sean and the staff at MCEC with regards to the finances. Most of you don't know, but they do a wonderful job preparing budgets on a monthly basis that we get to review and providing us with up-to-date information. There's two highlights with regards to the spending plan that I'd like to kind of re-emphasize. And that spending plan is on page 44 to 46 that has already been presented. But number one, the giving covenant is evolving. And so it's not that the old covenant is dead with the changes with MC Canada, but it evolves. And I believe that it will still evolve over the years to come. Number two is the actual budget numbers. And for those of you who aren't number oriented, there's only two numbers that you need to remember in a sense. One, the budget is $2 million. And that is so not accountant-like because the actual numbers are in front of you. But our budget is $2 million. The second part of that is $1 million goes to our partner agencies. And that should actually be revised after this weekend. It's actually more of our connected and partner ministries. I would like to thank you, our churches, our members, our individuals, for supporting MCEC with regards to finances or the ministries that we're involved in. So on behalf of the Executive Council, I move that we accept the 2018-2019 spending plan as printed on pages 44 to 46 in the discernment documents.
Again, I'd ask for a seconder for approval of the spending plan with your name and congregation. Thank you, Victor. The floor is open for questions on the spending plan.
Matthew Fraze, Hamilton Mennonite Church. I saw there was a note in the spending plan about the Canadian Mennonite covenant having been extended a year. Is that expected to remain stable, or is there kind of a renegotiation and reforming there? Because I think the original covenant really centers on Mennonite Church Canada rather than the regional churches.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a good question. With the restructuring of Mennonite Church Canada, we are currently actually engaging in an evaluation of communication strategy for the whole structure at all kinds of levels. The Canadian Mennonite is a part of that evaluation of how to work at communications into the future. So that's in process, and the covenant with Canadian Mennonite in the past has been a 5-year one. For the last 2 or 3 years, it's being renewed annually until we get a clear sense of where that goes. So stay posted.
Other questions? Okay, I'll ask for the question. So a vote on the approval of spending plan. All in favor? Opposed? One opposed. Thank you. Motion's carried.